We were just having this debate. I don't know how it started. It was like, Tony, if you died, would David Wright go to your funeral?
Do you not have the trivia brain like my guy
I told
does?
you, I'm not challenging him to anything. I'm not an idiot.
Was Lucas Duda a funny guy?
I loved Lucas Duda.
He loves Lucas Duda.
Yeah.
Lucas Duda was a tough nut to crack, but he and I had I don't know, we were just like simpatico or something.
There's no such thing as clutch. You're good or you're not good. You agree with that?
You're gonna tell me Peter had no clutch gene? There was
We
no
don't bring up
clutch.
that name. Actually, nobody heard you because it got bleeped.
That's right.
I'm Vito Calisi. This is Jonathan Barron, and we're joined by Anthony DiComo here on Meet at the Apple. Anthony, we're just starting our podcast journey with the Mets. I've been following your stuff. I feel like you're like one of the first names I remember knowing.
That makes me feel very old.
Well, you look like you're 27
I
or so.
appreciate
You look
that.
better
I
than me.
appreciate that very much. Yeah, no, I started as an intern at MLB.com back in 2007. So my first experience with this team, really, and I didn't follow the Mets growing up that closely. So my first experience with the team was 2007, the collapse and all of that. So it was really like
Good starting point.
But you get to know right away like what makes a Mets fan tick and what this fan base is all about. Because as terrible as that year was for the Mets, it really brought out the passion in the fans. And people forget because of how it ended, how fun of a summer that was.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
Yeah, I've been around the team in some form or fashion since then, full-time on the beat since 2010. So I've kind of feel like I've seen it all.
You really have seen it all. A lot has happened. The next year there was a smaller collapse, but still not a
A mini collapse.
mini collapse. But
A fall.
A fall, yeah. So where did you grow up, and who did you grow up rooting for?
Yeah, so this is going to get me in trouble because I was born on Long Island. I grew up a Yankee fan. When I was 8 years old, I moved to Massachusetts. And so I grew up kind of during the Yankees dynasty of the 90s.
Must be nice.
in Massachusetts.
So we also grew up during the Yankees dynasty.
Yeah.
Yeah. So long story short, I had no friends, of course, because I was always rooting for the Yankees. But no, came down here. I went to college up in Boston. Came down here after graduating to take my internship with MLB.com, and really since then it's been a crash course on all things Mets. And what's funny is because I didn't grow up a Mets fan, you don't have that intrinsic knowledge that some people have. But really during doing this on a day-to-day and getting through it, you learn a lot and you meet the people. Like you meet Keith Hernandez, right? You meet guys from the '86 Mets, Doc, Darryl, those guys. And then during the pandemic, when we're just trying to find anything to write, and we're doing like the top 5 this and the top 10 that lists for MLB.com, and I'm going through it and I'm learning more about the history of the franchise than I ever knew. So I feel like I'm so much more well-versed on the Mets. I mean, I guess I should be, but than I am on any other team, Yankees included, Red Sox included, all the teams that I grew up with. And it's one of the things that I really enjoy about the Mets is they have such a rich and cool and unique history. It's really unlike pretty much any other team in a lot of ways.
Do you know what's one thing I learned about the Mets history from you? The Mr. Softy machine in the press box.
When did it get installed? What's the history behind it?
Well, no, not the history. You were tracking it being broken and not being in there, weren't you?
No, that wasn't me, but I will say at Shea Stadium, my first couple of years covering the Mets were at Shea. They had a great soft serve machine, and then they opened Citi Field and there was nothing, and I think everyone was very sad about that. So when they did install it a few years back at Citi Field, that was a big moment for us in the media, yeah.
I thought you were the person, I have to find out now, I had bad information. I thought you were the person who tweeted like, update, the Mr. Softy machine is back in the press box. Because when I started at Citi Field, I was so excited to be able to go to that Mr. Softy machine, and I abuse it.
There was one very famous tweet you had, and that was about the balk, right? The consecutive games without a balk. What was it, 2014, September 2014?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, they were, I was just, it was late in the season, the Mets weren't in contention, and I was doing what I do a lot during games and just kind of screwing around and looking up stats, and I was like, it's September, it's like mid-September of the season at this point, and the Mets had not balked all year, and I looked it up, and they hadn't done it in decades. There was only like two teams, I think, in the history of baseball that had gotten an entire season without balking. So I tweeted out like, oh, this is neat, this is interesting. And 2 minutes later, Dillon Gee balks.
It's incredible.
What I remember most about that is so that thing just took off. It went viral immediately. And I remember we got down to the clubhouse after the game. We go in, and Dillon Gee, who's like the salt of the earth, nicest guy in the world, he's just standing there at his locker, arms folded, and he's staring at me. He's like, really, dude? Like, really? Sorry, I wasn't the one who did it.
That's funny because, we talk about this all the time, like jinxes and things like that. Are they real? So I guess the players, it's safe to say that they are aware of what's being said at all times.
How do you not know that? The amount of minor leaguers we've said to where you brought up something and then they said, oh yeah, like.
I guess that's true. Yeah, we've had a couple guys who we last year we talked with a bunch. not allowing many home runs, things like that. A home run was allowed, and then I get the blame, and it's totally unfair. But these are major league players, you know. And this was right after the game. Like someone, either Dillon hopped on his phone after he left the game, or. But I guess you got to be careful. Do you believe in jinxes?
I don't, but I respect those who do.
I don't either. Neither of us do.
I respect those.
We were both at Johan's no-hitter.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
As
how can you
fans.
believe in a jinx?
So that was a funny story as well, because Johan's no-hitter, that happened on a Friday night at Citi Field, and it was the first day back from a long road trip. So I had just started on the beat at that point. That was my first season. And usually how it works is if you're a beat writer, you go on the road trips, and then the first couple of days back home, the first couple of days before a trip, you're off, right? You're coming back from the road, you get a couple of days off. So there was really no regular writers on that trip, and I was actually at a bachelor party in Atlantic City.
Nice.
And the bachelor happened to be a huge Mets fan. There were a lot of Mets fans there, and this was in like the infancy of people being able to stream whatever they wanted on their phones at all times. So I was the only one who had access to stream MLB.com or MLB TV because I worked for MLB.com. So you've got about 12, 14 dudes at this bachelor party in Atlantic City. You can't get SNY down there on the local TV. And I've got my little my first smartphone that's probably about this big, and it's on top of the TV, and you've got all these guys like crowded around watching it. And then he does it, and the whole bachelor party goes nuts. So I didn't cover that one in person, but I do have a strong memory of it.
June 1st.
Do you remember before that it was so easy to get scores on your phone? You could sign up for text updates for Major League Baseball for like a few dollars a month?
Well, so I'm a little older than you guys. I remember growing up with a thing called newspapers. And
What's that?
What's that?
No, but look, your team played out west. You didn't know if they won. And I would remember, because I was the type of kid who, I read the sports section cover to cover every morning. And I would wake up and again, I grew up a Yankee fan. The Yankees would play out west. I had no idea if they won. So I would turn on SportsCenter on the TV, and if it wasn't on in like the first 10 minutes before I had to go to school, you just wouldn't know. You would not know if your favorite team won until like a day later when the next newspaper came. It's wild that happened in my lifetime. And that makes me feel older than anything else we're going to talk about.
Did you ever have to call? There was also a number you could call to get sports scores.
phone?
Yeah.
Sports
Yeah.
phone.
Sports
yeah.
phone is, you're not that old.
Well, so no, but that did exist. And one of my first real journalism jobs when I was in college, I worked at the Boston Globe. It was a foot in the door kind of job. But basically, my task was to do whatever the editors wanted and to answer the phone. So invariably, this was, again, right before smartphones were really a thing. People would call the Boston Globe sports section and they would be like, hey, can you tell me who won the Bruins game?
Wait, what?
Yeah. And a lot of times you would get like drunk people at bars, and they would call up and they would be like, hey, can you settle a bet for me? And a lot of times it was kind of funny and you would humor them, but sometimes you'd be on deadline and you'd be trying to like get the newspaper put together before it had to go to press. And somebody would call up and they'd be like, who had more home runs, like Mickey Mantle or Jimmy Fox? You're like, I do not have time for this right now. And it was also almost like, for some people, it was like a talk radio outlet. There was this one guy, he was famous, he was called Frank from Montreal. He would always call, he'd be like,
I said Frank, I got scared.
He said, this is Frank from Montreal, and he would just like go on a rant about the Boston Bruins, and I'd be sitting here and be like, and I'm like typing with one hand trying to get work done. Different world, and yet not so long ago.
Well, they never got Ray Bork that cup. He had to go to Colorado to win that cup.
That's right.
So you've been covering the Mets for a while. A lot of fans know you for that, but you also wrote a book with David Wright, which was a very popular book and a great read. What was that experience like writing that book, and what is your relationship like with David, having, I'm sure, so many conversations with him?
Yeah, it's cool because I feel like the process was interesting for me because I'd never written a book before, and writing a book in someone else's voice is a different animal too. But what I didn't realize going into it was that it was going to be an interesting process in different ways for David, because the questions I was asking, and really I was just interviewing him for an hour at a time here, an hour at a time there. We would do it over the phone, we would do it in person if I was out in LA or he was in New York. And he was remembering things that he forgot about. And so he's almost like reliving his career all over again. So that was a very cool experience, I think, for both of us. And as you guys know, as everyone around the Mets knows, David is salt of the earth kind of guy. So he was super easy to work with. The one criticism he gave me, and I always told him, I would send him the drafts when we were getting along in it, and it's, David, I want this to read like it's actually you talking. Like if anything I write sounds like it's not you talking, tell me. And he's like, no, this is good. The one criticism is when I would really get like inside the game and talk about, what he was feeling, what he was thinking in a certain moment, in a big moment, in an at-bat or something. And there were a couple, I can't even remember the exact language that I used, but he was like, "You are such a nerd. A baseball player would never talk that way. Like, say it this way instead." And I was like, all right, that's probably a fair point.
I've been called that too,
Yeah.
a time or two, so.
We just started like kind of being kind of cool with David Wright after the last 2 days. And Jon, unfortunately, lost to David Wright in David Wright trivia.
I don't think I lost. What we
That's
did
tough.
was we had a third party write some trivia questions. I grew up a massive David Wright fan, and some people know me as someone who has a good memory and knows a lot of random stuff. Like I remembered your Dillon Gee tweet.
Yep.
And we went head to head on David Wright related trivia. So it was questions like, who'd you hit your home run against, the first homer at Citi Field? Who was that against? Or who did you pick up the hit that you broke the Mets all-time hit record with? And here's the thing. I knew 4 out of the 5 answers. I didn't know Gavin Floyd was the pitcher who allowed his first grand slam.
Neither did I.
I didn't have that one. I had the other 4, but it wouldn't have been fun, and it wouldn't have been a good look for David if you just had me just coming out of nowhere, just like hammering him on all these questions. So
here's the other thing about David, and I realized this from a young age. I've talked about this with other writers, and it applies to writers, friends, players, whoever. You know you're in with David if he messes with you.
Yes.
Because he's the type of guy that he's not going to do it to people that he's not close with or doesn't think can take it, but he loves that type of humor. He loves messing with people. I remember one time after a game, and last game of a series, you would tend to go to the bigger players on the team to sort of get state of the team type quotes, and a lot of times with David that would involve like he would do his press conference, and then a couple of us would linger and just kind of chit chat a little bit while the team was getting ready to leave. And there was this one time, and we were just having this debate. I don't know how it started, but it was like it came up, Tony, if you died, would David Wright go to your funeral? And we were debating among us writers, and so one of the other writers goes up to David and says, would you go to his funeral? And he goes, "Oh, hell no." And then he was joking, he was laughing. And he goes up to me, he's like, do you have any siblings? Yeah, I was like, "Yeah, I have a sister." He's like, "Oh, okay." He's like, "Yeah, we'd have her come out and throw out a first pitch." I was like, "Oh, but you'd squat behind home plate and catch it, right?" He'd be like, No, we'd have the backup catcher come out and do that."
Oh man, Ramon Castro maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Back in those days.
Do you have any favorite trivia questions that you have just off deck that you want my attack dog to try to answer?
Trivia questions that I want.
I was not prepared. I was not.
I
told
know,
there'd be trivia
nobody's
today.
prepared.
Here's the problem: is I don't think there's anything I know about Mets history that he does not. I just don't think I.
That's
could,
the point. We want
yeah.
to show the people that my dog barks and he bites.
No.
I could come up with questions that I don't know the answer to that he might not, but something that I know and he doesn't. I trust you implicitly on this.
That feels good.
I appreciate that. That is a nice feather in my cap.
This guy's heart is
How
probably
good are you on
fluttering.
like 1960s stuff though? 'Cause that's
Yeah, I mean, not that good.
Yeah.
I was born in '91. My first game was August 27th, 1997. So, I really started getting into it around that time. John Olerud was my first favorite
Yeah.
player. Brian McRae hit the first home run I ever saw
Okay.
live and in person. So that's kind of my heyday. My dad obviously raised me a diehard Mets fan.
right.
But I'm a little bit gray when you
Okay.
start going back into the 60s and the 70s.
What
as
if I
well.
ask you about like the '86 World Series, like who won Game 1, who won Game 2?
I know
sort
that
of
they were
thing?
down
Okay.
2-0,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then Nails led
Right.
off Game 3 with a home run,
Okay.
and Gary Carter had 2 homers. I know that. I mean, that's easy stuff. Come on.
I'm just
You know,
making
Kevin
sure.
Bass
I'm just making some people
made the
pretend
last
that
out.
life before they were born doesn't exist.
No, see, I'm cognizant of that.
Yeah.
I'm aware that if you are that kind of person, then you're a total fraud and total phony. So I won't sit here and say that I've got all that buttoned up and covered as
Yeah.
well. But I have thought you can't just be this guy who pretends like life before it didn't exist. On top of David Wright, and I know there's a lot of guys you can mention, and we probably won't hit them all, but who were some other guys that you really enjoyed covering during your time working as a Mets beat reporter?
Yeah, it's such a hard question because a lot of the favorites are not the household names, I
sure.
would say, by and large, and that's probably not coincidence either, but there's been so many over the years. I almost feel bad singling out one. When I first started, Mike Pelfrey was one of
that's
the biggest
Vito's
stars
guy.
That's my guy.
on the team, and he was just great to talk to. Again, you got a picture from my perspective. You're 22, you're walking in a big league clubhouse for the first time. You don't know anything. So when some of the bigger guys on the team, like David Wright, was always very kind to me from a young age. Pelfrey was great just to talk to. I remember Joe Smith on that 2017
Joe Smith.
was great to talk to. And then the next year, I think Nick Evans came up, and Then you get into like Josh Satin and those guys. Like some of those guys I still, will trade texts with every now and then. But it's not always, the stars who are good. But I'll tell you what, we've been talking amongst writers this spring. This clubhouse now is, if not the best one they've had, just in terms of personalities and guys who are willing to talk and not just, give you canned quotes, but having a real conversation with you. It's early, but I really like the vibe in there. I really like a lot of the young players, the Christian Scotts and Mike Vassals of the world coming up, Kevin Parada. So this has a chance to be one of those teams where you can really, look back years from now and be like, oh yeah, they had Brett Beatty and Mark Vientos, like great guys, and that's a good thing.
Here's a tip. Drew Gilbert and Jet Williams.
Yeah.
If you can get them together, it's a yin and yang.
They're a comedy duo.
Yeah.
Are they?
There's
Okay.
you have the straight man and the funny man. I mean,
Yeah.
like, Drew is ready for SNL.
Oh, yeah, he is.
Drew could go on SNL tomorrow.
Yeah.
And
I
Jet,
believe that.
And Jet is very reserved, and he kind of just sits and takes it, and then every now and again he'll jab a little bit back. But they're hilarious together. Drew Gilbert is.
Jet seems like one of those guys who he's always paying attention to what's going on without him, just sort of taking notes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want our scouting report for minor leaguers who are just great personalities, Dom Hamill.
Yes.
Yeah. Dom's
Electric
great.
interview. Mike Vassal. Mike Vassal was the first guy we ever interviewed, like right over here a year ago for our minor league podcast, Future of Flushing. And just so funny, so quick for the rest of spring training when we were interviewing minor leaguers. He would come over to us and like we were like you, we were beat reporters getting information from him on who to talk to.
Well, Mike Vassal's a Massachusetts guy, so he and
Yes,
I talk
he
New
is.
England Patriots all the time. Yeah.
Oh, you're a Pats guy?
Yeah. So he and I,
Must be nice.
Well,
Yankees
it
and
was
Pats.
for a long
Imagine
time.
Yankees
It was
oh,
for a
and
long
Pats.
time. Yeah.
You a Laker guy too?
Yeah,
No.
okay. Take it
You're a
easy.
Celtics
Take it easy.
guy.
Take it easy.
Yeah.
So who's a player that fans might be surprised? We're talking about guys who are funny, who have a great personality. Who are some players that fans would be shocked to hear were really funny and just like big personalities behind the scenes?
Really funny and big personalities behind the scenes. Oh, that's a. I'm trying to think. You put me on the spot. It's tough to think of individual guys.
You're
over
so
the
used
years.
to answering like actual baseball questions
I know.
that these are just like, what the hell are you two doing?
Well, no, I'm trying to give you a good answer because there's a lot of guys who will say a little thing here, a little thing there. I mean, I wish that we had more of a, that the language barrier didn't exist with Kodai Senga, because everything I hear, he's hilarious and he's got a great personality, but we see so little of it because of the language barrier and everything has to be translated. And it's not like even you get with some of the Spanish-speaking guys who you at least, I know a little Spanish, they know probably more English than I know Spanish, you can communicate in that way. Francisco Alvarez is very, very funny, actually. I remember in the clubhouse last year, and Mark Vientos was chirping about something, and he was talking about how he's from Miami and South Florida, and Alvarez just shoots him a look, and he's like, Connecticut.
He was born in
He
Connecticut.
was born in Connecticut,
Yeah, that's
and he
fact.
grew up there for a lot of his youth.
That's
so
fact.
He's a very funny guy. Yeah, but there have been a lot over the years. I know that's not the best answer, but it's David's up there. David's got a good sense of humor. He thinks he's funnier than he is, but I'll give him like a 4 out of 10 on the comedy
Yeah,
scale.
yesterday he and I were both going to use the restroom before we started our conversation that you guys will get to see eventually, and hopefully you enjoy it. And he saw me and is like, you know what? You go first. I know how nervous you are right now. And I was because I did something with him last year, and I was nervous. Like, it was the first time I'd ever met, my childhood hero. And I guess he picked up on that, and he gave me some crap yesterday. But like you said, I guess it's a good thing. So what you said before about him messing with you means he kind of likes you. Made me feel
Well, he was here
validated.
2 days this spring, and I happened to be off the first day, so I didn't come to camp. And I get a text message at like 4 in the afternoon from David. It says, "You missed my presence today."
That's hilarious.
So I just replied back, who is this?
Was Lucas Duda a funny guy?
I loved Lucas Duda.
He
actually.
loves Lucas Duda.
Yeah.
Lucas Duda was a tough nut to crack, but he and I had I don't know, we were just like simpatico or something. You do have a different bond, I will say, as a beat writer with players who you cover their entire career, or you're there when they come up.
Yeah.
And Lucas Duda was one of the first ones for me that I was there when he first came up, covered his entire career. And he was funny, man. He was on, in 2014, I covered a postseason, the Mets did, or not the Mets, MLB did a tour of Japan. So they went to Osaka, Tokyo, Sapporo, Okinawa, and they had a bunch of all-stars go, and Lucas Duda was the one Mets guy who signed up and who went. And he and I just sort of like, I don't know, I spent a lot of time with him on that trip because we were the only guys who sort of knew each other. And he's funny, man. He is real, like, it's deadpan.
Okay.
It's very low key.
Yeah.
I wish I had thought of that before you said it, because he's a perfect response of a guy who's just like, you wouldn't look at him and be like, oh, Lucas Duda is hilarious. Because most people are like, this guy doesn't speak. But when he does, he's very, very funny. I called him a couple of years ago for the anniversary of Johan's no-hitter, because I was trying to get as many perspectives as I could on that game. And I talked to Luca, and he calls me, he's like, why are you calling me? Wound up having a great conversation. He's living out in Southern California where he's from, but yeah, good guy.
A good ball player.
Yeah, underrated.
Yeah, 30 home runs that 2014 season. I think he hit his 30th. He had a walk-off the second to last day of the year against Houston. Yeah, Lucas Duda was a good player. And, you know, everyone was like, oh, he's not clutch, he's not clutch. There's no such thing. This is a shot, right? There's no such thing as clutch. You're good or you're not good. Do you agree with that?
There's a little such thing as
You think
clutch.
so?
I do. I think.
Like, you think hitting with wrist, but you don't think that if you're a good hitter, over time,
I know
all
what the
things will
numbers
even out?
say, and I know that it does.
Water finds its level.
But look, you're a Mets fan. I know you detest this guy. You're gonna tell me Jeter had no clutch gene. There was
We
no
don't bring up
clutch?
that name. Actually, nobody heard you because it got bleeped.
That's right.
Yeah.
I will say this: on top of Lucas Duda being a very good player and probably an underrated player in his time with the Mets, you got the Mets' Drew Smith in that trade. Drew Smith's been a very good reliever here for 6 years.
Tampa
So
Bay Ray. To
And
answer
a great personality in the clubhouse.
Yes.
yeah.
To answer your question, I don't think clutch. I think that he was just good. And he just did it all the time. Whether
you're never
there was
gonna
a
be
man on
clutch if you're
second
not
or
good.
not.
There's so many
That's
bleeps
right.
coming up right now that I don't think people understand
We're not
what's
even going
happening.
to be able to air this podcast.
No, we are. This has been a fantastic conversation.
One more person you got to talk to in there. I'm sure you've probably talked to him before, but Harrison Bader,
Yeah.
like,
He's gonna. Met fans are gonna love Harrison.
He's
Bader.
a personality for sure, and I'm only just barely getting to know him now. But I know from the Yankee writers will have said that he is definitely a personality, and they've dealt with a few over there. So yeah, from our perspective as writers, like you want guys who are talkers, right?
Of course.
And all I can tell you right now about Harrison Bader is he's definitely a talker. He's definitely a talker, and he's one of those guys who, you ask him a question, he's going to answer the question. He's not just going to spout some cliche to try and tell you what you want to hear. He's going to actually think about it, synthesize it, and answer the question. That's all we can ask for as writers.
this is the funniest spring training preview I think anybody's done. It's just like, here's who on the team has the great personality, who's going to be a fun interview.
Yeah, well, you gave us a bit of a scouting report on some guys that we watched growing up, and
Yeah.
it's a symbiotic thing.
Can I tell you about my Mike Pelfrey fandom real quick?
Yeah, I'd love to.
At my desk at Citi Field, I bought this in, I think, 08 maybe.
It must have been 08.
It had to be
That was
08.
when he kind of broke out a little
I
bit.
bought a blank jersey, I went to Stitches, and I got Big Pelf put on the back.
That's
It
great.
doesn't say Pelfrey, it says Big Pelf.
Well, that was the thing. I think Darren from the 7 line made the Go Big Pelf t-shirts back.
There you go.
I think it was after the 08 season, because he was really good
I
that
had it
year.
in 08.
Did you?
Yeah. People were calling him Big Pelf before the shirt.
Remember the
went
Go
out.
Big Pelf shirts, though?
Vaguely,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
I mean, that
do
was
Do you
Wagner
not
was
have
in on
do you not
that.
have the trivia braid of 7-line merch like my guy
I told
does?
you, I'm not challenging him to anything. I'm not an idiot. I know what I can win
This
and what
guy
I
can
can't.
give you the 7-line release line from day one all the way till now. I can tell
What
you their
about
first
if
shirt.
I put you against Gary Cohen or Howie Rose? Would you be able to out trivia them?
That's not fair.
No, yeah,
They're
of course.
encyclopedias.
Look,
And not only
I-
that, there's so many more years. Like
Yeah.
I know we said a second ago that like life began before you were born, but you had all of that
Yeah,
time to
of
like be
course.
accruing information.
I haven't studied up that well. I mean, look, I have the utmost respect for those two guys. Those are guys that we both idolized. I wanted to be a broadcaster when I was younger. And in college, when they were like, yeah, well, if you want to do that, you're going to have to go live in Topeka, Kansas for like 5-10 years chasing a dream. And I told my then girlfriend, now wife, that, and she was like, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to stay in Great Neck, New York.
And look at you now.
And look at me
Look
now.
at us now. We have a podcast.
Yeah, we have a microphone on. It all kind of happened
Right
back door.
here.
It all kind of happened.
You know, Gary Cohen is the first guy to ever drive out of the parking lot and sign an autograph for me.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
I can tell
remember
you.
forever.
I can tell you. I'll tell you off
What did he
air.
sign? What did he sign?
A baseball.
Okay.
I'll tell you off air about one player who screamed at me.
I
wait
yell
for
at him.
that.
I yell at him all the time. So
And you know what's cool? Honestly, I've never been in a situation where somebody said, "I'll tell you off air," and now I got to do it to somebody else.
Totally. We're gonna have that conversation. I can't wait. Great.
Well, dude, thanks so much for sitting and talking with us, and we'll be here all season. So anytime you want to sit with the fellas and catch up, we're here.
It's a blast. Can't wait. Let's do it again.